Before I begin, I'd like to recite to you a spoken word poem. They say loud is gold. They say that loud is power. They say loud is a force that has no choice but to be known. That the boldest of voices would suffice. That the boldest of voices stay prized in the eyes. They said, shout, scream, for volume receives grace, and only the loudest can partake and win in this race. The essence of this poem, ladies and gentlemen, describes something small yet profound. Well, small is quite an understatement. It defines something massive yet unseen, something that holds the weight of identity, the power of connection, and the potential for change. It's your voice. The creation of sound is a phenomenal concept, and I could get into the details of this all day long, but I'll explain it to you in 3 simple steps. First, air flows from the lungs, then it vibrates through the vocal folds until finally transforming into the sounds we call voice. These sounds are then shaped into the words that we use to communicate, to connect, and express ourselves. But we can all agree that not all voices sound the same now, do they? Some voices resonate powerfully, like those of great vocalists and public speakers, while others are often quieter and sometimes overshadowed. For the majority of my childhood, I belonged to the latter group. Allow me to tell you a story of a young boy born and raised in the bustling suburbs of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. With the world as his playground, he journeys through kindergarten, elementary, middle school, high school, and finally, university, with a curiosity of what life could offer, of the borders he could cross, and of the person he could become. Throughout this little boy's life, he becomes captivated with reading and thus develops a flair for words. A writer, poet, and journalist at heart, he has had to master the art of diving deep into a topic to uncover hidden narratives and challenge the status quo. Today, that not so little boy stands before you, ready to share with you how you can use your voice to make long-lasting change. So I'd like to preface this with a little bit of a backstory about me. Growing up, a lot of people would assume that I am an introvert, and this can be greatly attributed to the fact that I have a relatively soft or low voice. My voice was one that was constantly overshadowed. There's nothing I loathed more than a group conversation. I mean, the embarrassment that would ensue after saying something and then being ignored was too much for me to handle. And don't get me started on when people would ask me to repeat myself twice or thrice. These experiences caused me to develop a complicated relationship with my voice. Now, I had no problem with carrying this label of introvert because I, for one, believe that introverts happen to be among the most interesting people on the planet. But for me, that simply wasn't an accurate representation of who I truly was. And like any human experience, the constant repeat of this narrative slowly began to shape my lived experience. There were a number of opportunities that passed me by simply because of this narrative. For example, growing up, I was sort of into theater and voiceover acting, but I would constantly ask myself, what casting director would cast an introvert for a role? I used to love public speaking and still do, but for the first few stage opportunities I had, I was constantly plagued with the thought of, who is listening to me? Can they actually hear me? Is the point that I'm trying to put across reaching out to people? I felt like my voice was confining me within 4 walls of a small, suffocating room, where every word that came out didn't quite make its way to the outside world. However, deep down, I knew I was better than this. Deep down, I knew my potential, which is why these experiences became a lesson. These experiences encouraged me to think deeply about how our voices are closely tied to our personalities and how society perceives them. The stubborn journalistic side of me decided to conduct some research and found that there have been multiple studies conducted around psycholinguistics that state that the tone, pitch, and cadence of your voice has the ability to make an impact on the way people view your confidence, your trustworthiness, and your competence. Sometimes even more than the words that you speak. It's one of the reasons why people with loud voices may come across as more confident than their peers. I can think of a better way to summarize this by quoting communication expert Vin Gyan, who states, "Your voice is your personality." However, again, the stubborn journalistic nature in me decided to take a step further and explore the other side of this narrative. And what I have come to learn is sometimes the loudest people aren't always the brightest in the room. No shade to any extroverts listening, by the way. And the quietest, not as helpless as they seem. And as with most conversations, it's imperative to scratch beyond the surface to uncover hidden narratives and see things in a different light. So today, I'm not here to disprove research around our communication styles. I 110% agree that our voices are imperative in making first impressions. However, I hope to be able to make you think about how we can see our voices beyond just tools of communication and answer this one fundamental question. How can we redefine the way we see our voices, not just as a reflection of our identities, but as a tool for change? The truth of the matter is, all our voices have the ability to make an impact. And this is a lesson I came to learn later down in my journey. In July of 2021, I started Project Mindset, a podcast dedicated to helping fellow teenagers and adolescents navigate the complexities or the hurdles of teenagehood. I didn't have much of a set other than my phone and a computer, and my motto was simple: a young adult, a microphone, a voice. I wanted to leave an impact in the lives of my peers in any way that I could. To my surprise, the birth of the podcast led to comments like these. Now, these comments not only motivated me to continue what I was doing, but they gave me a sense of accomplishment. And for the first time, I got to truly see what our voices can be. Catalysts for social change. In the wise words of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, the human voice is the organ of the soul. So I'd like to ask you, what song is your soul singing? And most importantly, how does it make people feel? In my case, people felt heard, people felt seen, people felt like for the first time they could finally connect with somebody. Other songs being sung are songs advocating for social equity, educational equity, safer spaces for women and girls, justice for the oppressed, and many, many more. So once again, what song is your soul singing? Fast forward to 2024, and that tiny little podcast I started opened doors I never would have imagined. So I got to realize that our voices can be gateways for opportunity. My voice was able to get me a spot among the Commonwealth Correspondents Network as a journalist. It then paved the way for me to become a 100-org youth ambassador, and those in turn gave me a chance to represent Tanzania at the World Bank Youth Summit as a delegate, and finally, host of a second podcast, Commonwealth Youth Voices. Commonwealth Youth Voices is a project that I hold dear to my heart, primarily because it is a collection of how young people are innovating in order to elevate their communities. To me, it is quite literally the embodiment of innovate to elevate. As a podcast host, I have had the privilege of hosting amazing leaders from around the world: Nigeria, Guyana, the Caribbean, Greece, Uganda, you name it. It's one of the things I've grown to love about podcasting. One of my favorite episodes is titled "A Decade of Activism, Lessons from a Youth Leader Advocating for Social Reform, where I interviewed, I'd rather say where I spoke with Najee Nunes, an international award-winning speaker, UNICEF Youth Foresight Fellow, and social advocate from the Caribbean. He states, and I quote, "Young people should be agents and not objects of change." So I'd like to pose the question, when we reserve all our attention to the loudest speakers, what message are we sending to their counterparts who have just as much of the ability to instill change? From my journey from insecurity to self-discovery to confidence and finally impact, I have seen firsthand how a single voice can resonate, inspire, and open doors. But I want to turn the spotlight on you. How can you use your voice to make long-lasting change? Well, firstly is to start where you are. The most repeated phrase I have heard from speaking to these leaders is start where you are. It's quite cliche, I know. But one thing that almost all of these leaders have in common is that they started where they were with what they had. They didn't wait for the perfect moment because, truth be told, sometimes the perfect moment is now, here. Whether that's in your local community, at your workplace, or even in your own life. Secondly, is to use technology wisely. Technology is your best friend. And with the advent of the digital revolution, social media platforms have and continue to play a crucial role in amplifying the voices of youth all around the world. With tech, it doesn't matter how soft or high-pitched your voice is, as the right message will be able to meet the right people. And last but not least, speak with intention. When you speak, make it count. Whether you're advocating for change, asking for help, your voice carries more power when used deliberately and purposefully. Each of you in the audience here today possesses this powerful tool. Let's create a better, more inclusive narrative where everybody, regardless of how they sound, can be seen as agents of change just as much as outgoing people. Let's create a better narrative where our voices are seen not just as a means of communication, but as a reflection of our ideas, our passions, and our purpose. So to conclude, I'd like to give you the final part of the poem. They said a voice must boom to be felt, but they forgot that even a whisper can cause an earthquake. So to them I say, here I stand, not the loudest, but undoubtedly the bold. And I've learned that my words are worth their gold. Thank you.